Welcome to the next episode of the Dialogue. I'm Abha Shah, the SGA president, and with me today is Dr. Mike Edwards, who's the academic dean for the HCC Coleman College for Health Sciences. Welcome, Dr. Edwards, and thank you for doing this interview with us today.
Thank you for having me.
The first question I want to start with is the grade appeal and the grievance process. What we want to know is what happens after the committee meets and the recommendations have been submitted to you. Is there a follow-up with the student or the faculty? What is the process afterwards?
After the formal process, as part of formal process, which would be the disposition, of course, students receive certified notice in the mail. We try to ensure that they've received that notification in a timely fashion. And if the grade appeal, if they've succeeded in administrative review and have affirmed their position as stated in the official documents of record, then we'll do a grade change. If, in certain cases, a student feels that the issue hasn't been resolved to his or her satisfaction, then they can go forward.
Okay.
That means they can come to me or Dr. Young or Dr. Young. And by the way, Dr. Young is the final decision maker for those issues, either grievance or grade appeal for Coleman College.
If the grievance is over and coming next semester, is there ever a follow-up done with the particular student or whoever the faculty or the staff member was? Like, has there been a change in the way, if it was about teachers' behavior with a certain student or certain rules in the class, later on, starting next semester, has there been a change in the behavior or those particular rules? Is that ever followed up?
Most of my experience has been here at Coleman for the last 4.5, almost 5 years, is if the issues deal with essential requirements of a program, or if they deal with some substantive issues in that program, we certainly want to give our faculty an opportunity to address those.
Definitely.
I try not to get in those matters, ideally, because I may not necessarily be a subject matter or content expert. So we want to let the experts kick this around, digest it, and review, and within the understanding that their actions are also in an envelope of industry expectations. What's expected in healthcare generally, the prescript of regulation from the accrediting agencies, various agencies, and any professional affiliations, rules, regulations.
Right.
So as far as an immediate change, or as far as anything substantively, in my 5-year history here, there hasn't been a lot of that, because by and large, most of the issues deal with a grading process, fairness of that process, notice of what that process was, all the things that students have a right to, and based on the facts, then it tends to work itself out. Now, as far as curriculum ideas or curriculum changes, again, we want the experts to do that.
Definitely.
However, because I am a dean, an academic dean, there's a procedure for that that gives the faculty an opportunity to fashion what we do here that's responsible, that meets the expectations of the community and the industry, the competencies. So that's interwoven. I do believe that if there are some issues dealing with student conduct, the tolerance of it, whether or not we've given adequate notice in a particular program handbook, those may be some issues that may be debatable and open to the type of process we're talking about. But fundamentally, the substantive things, like what types of things are taught, what's the pedagogy, those are things that we want to best leave up to the experts.
Definitely.
But it's how that's delivered, notice requirements, reasonable rights to effective teaching, effective communication. That's what we want to try to ensure.
sometimes, and these are some rare cases, not all the times, we do get an adjunct faculty who's probably not aware of how things work at Coleman or what's going
Okay.
on with that particular program or the
Sure.
class.
Sure.
And it's when we try to talk to them, it seems like they're more clueless than us. And sometimes there have been instances where it seems like the syllabus and what they deliver to us or what they expect from us does not quite really match what's on the syllabus. And we just want to know, is there an orientation the adjunct faculty go through, just like we go through, so we know what are our expectations, the same way we would expect our adjunct faculties, so that we're all in the same par, especially if we're working together on a class and we've been told something and we're following the syllabus, we would expect the same from our instructor. So we just don't know what's the process when an adjunct comes in.
Our goal is that for the singular issues to which we've hired them, that we get the best expertise we can.
Right.
Now, if I would hope that those individuals know where Coleman exists.
Right. Right.
Okay. Now, in terms of how we operate, it's hard to ask an adjunct to really be up to speed exactly on all our operational procedures.
Right.
I know our program directors do their best as far as onboarding of
Right.
new folks,
Right.
who the director certainly is, because that's how they get hired
Mm-hmm.
with that recommendation,
Right.
what their credentials are,
Right.
what their expertise is, and hopefully they've had the opportunity to examine the nature of how they communicate with our students. Now, what we are going to do at Coleman, and in a response to our latest efforts in strategic planning under the vision of Dr. Young, we have formed a half-baked idea team,
Okay.
and it sounds kind of interesting, half-baked idea.
Right.
But basically, it's an incubator.
Okay.
Excuse me. It's an incubator project to see what can we do in terms of maybe achieve some more idealistic issues in terms of onboarding of adjuncts. Now, as far as my expectations on the quality of instruction, we do have evaluations of
Right.
instruction,
Right.
and I would encourage students to avail themselves of that process.
Right.
Take the time to evaluate the instructor. Take the time to share with that director or that instructor overall of record what some of the issues are,
Sure.
because we don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
We
that's
need to hear that
That's true.
feedback because that helps us progress.
true. Right.
That helps to ensure that we're achieving what we're supposed to achieve.
Right.
And that is the finest training that we can accomplish.
My next question for you, Dr. Edwards, is actually about the change in the time length of the classes. In our last episode, Dr. Young did address why the change from the 16-week to 8 weeks
Okay.
regarding the 10.5-month faculty contract, the budget cuts. She explained us all of that in detail, and we understood the change. And somewhere it is very helpful, especially when there are some classes where the first 8 weeks is a theory and the next 8 weeks is clinicals, and it's helping
Right.
our students a lot. But one particular issue which has come up is that there was one particular semester where there were two 8-week sessions, obviously in a 16-week session, but in both of those 8-week sessions, students had to go through a whole course of theory and clinicals, and then second 8 weeks was again a whole course of theory and clinicals, which was typically done in 2 16-week semesters, was done in one 16-week semester.
Sure.
And students have had a lot of difficulties in those courses, and a lot of them have not been able to probably move forward and might be repeating one of the course, not both, but somewhere somebody had issues with one of those classes and they have to repeat it.
Certainly.
So what was the idea behind this, and do you really see it helping the students?
The 8-week courses were a responsible strategy driven by a need for innovation, looking at budget,
Right.
The state was in a budget crisis at the time. We did have a budget task force for the district, working with our chancellor and her executive staff. And then all of the colleges also had input, representation.
Right.
And the dialogue centered around, obviously, looking holistically, whole ball of wax,
Right.
of what we can do. One of the things that was produced was there was some data suggested that let's look at a different mode of delivery.
Right.
It met well with the sense of urgency in workforce training. It seemed to work well from a philosophy standpoint, a philosophical standpoint,
Right.
in theory. Let's get them out sooner. Let's get this done. Now, what it might have done is obviously integrated more of didactic and the clinical experience, which, you know, might have been challenging. Might have been challenging.
Right.
The interest, though, was in the best interest of students to see if this would be effective.
Right.
Oftentimes, as you know, in many of our clinical experiences,
Right.
not necessarily hit and miss, but we serve at the whim of the institutions
Right.
that we're really
Right.
grateful that participate with us,
Right.
that
Right.
allow us to get
Yeah,
in there.
definitely.
And so our responsibility is, though, to ensure the student does get X amount of hours. Now, as far as down the road, again, I'm taking it, this is more, your question dealt more with the nursing program.
Yeah.
Down the road, we know that the state of Texas, through the BON, they're marching towards a standard curriculum for
Okay.
all nursing programs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And what that will do is then simply tell us, as a prescript, a prescription, an outline, footprint,
Right.
what programs can and cannot do, what they have to do.
Okay.
So we're not sure how that means, what that equates to what the experience is going to be in terms of med-surg or PDOB, the length of delivery. But as this happens, let's hope that there's still some room for reasonable innovation
Right.
so that we keep pace and remain as relevant and
Right.
as opportunistic
Right.
as we
Right.
are, opportunistic as we are, so that we can infuse some healthy new ideas.
What would be your tips for us as students related to studies and being successful in our programs? Can you give us some tips and advice?
What I would do as a student
Right.
today is, of course, I was an alpha, so I'm a nerd.
Right.
I'm still a nerd. You got to spend more than 1 hour a week on your classes.
Definitely.
Now, in this building, of course, you know the high emotional content of our courses because, you know, allied health training and nursing, serious business. The gravity of the subject matter will compel you to look at it more than just casually.
Right.
But I would spend more time than you really need to. There's no such thing as being over-prepared.
Correct. Correct.
Okay? And preparation builds confidence.
Right.
It really breeds success.
True.
So am I saying everybody needs to be a nerd? No, but I am saying that you need to concentrate on time management and give it the type of attention that it deserves. If it's a serious subject matter, then go at it with that type of tenacity, that type of dedication and commitment.
Right.
So you then come out on the other side of it with the result that you wanted to achieve and you set for yourself to begin with.
Right.
Is it painful? Yeah, you have to be a little, masochistic about it in terms because, embracing ideas and becoming, trying to look at model behavior, successful profile, of successful students. There is a changing process. There is change there. You have to grow into it a little bit.
Right.
No, the experience shouldn't be entirely painful, but there are those times when perhaps you should get a headache. Perhaps, there's going to be a little, you're going to be tired. But it is a tireless pursuit, and that's the type of appetite. So what I would say is look at time management. There's nothing like being prepared. I used to like to look at the bold words and then flip back and forth with a glossary, a
Mhm.
dictionary, and then write my notes in my words,
Sure.
explaining what it is that are the basic concepts in philosophy. As long as I've able to digest the basic concepts in philosophy, then you stand a chance to really kind of gleaning where they're going.
Right.
And that's it. It's all about time management.
Right.
That's the big ticket. Now, study groups are good. Study groups are good. But the caution that I usually give to students that happen to casually find, or not so casually find my way to my office, is that be careful with it, though, because you really want to learn the stuff on your own.
That's true.
But the study groups are good because you then get a chance to see and experience how other students are dealing with the issues. There may be some ways or catchphrases or mechanisms that they can offer to say, well, you know what, this is how I learned this particular thing.
Right.
And then why don't you consider this? Why don't you consider that?
Right.
But as far as what I used to call group therapy in turning in projects, I don't think you really want to, because sometimes that leads to grade inflation. And the grade inflation really doesn't help the individual student because then they really didn't get a chance to really absorb the material so that eventually they can teach themselves as a professional, and that's one of our goals. So you want to master the material, then it's going to be the person in the mirror.
All right.
And got to pay that price.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Edwards, for this interview. I know your time is very precious, and we're really happy you could give us your time, and this is going to be very, very helpful for the students. On behalf of the students, I want to thank you for all your time, for everything you do for Coleman and for students. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say that we appreciate our students here. This is a fine institution. Coleman College has a history of producing some very productive people. And it's my pride and a privilege and an honor to serve here as their academic dean.